I think we may as well get going. Hello, everyone. I'm not alone today. I have not one, but two Wills with me, which is exciting. Not least because it means I've got to use two of the little intro slides because I was only expecting one. I haven't done a three-way one of these yet. Will P, as pictured, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi guys, my name's Will. So as you said, one of two today. I'm a senior admissions consultant here at UniAdmissions, and it's my job just to speak to parents and students to kind of offer any advice that we can regarding the application process, and also to see if they may be suitable for one of our programs.
And we've also got another Will.
Oh, I like the transition, Matt. Well done. Yeah, hi everyone. I am also called Will. I basically lead our team of consultants here at UniAdmissions. Anyone who's come to a few of these might recognize me. But yeah, I'm usually joining Matt for a couple of these each month to be able to speak with you guys, answer your questions, those kind of things.
Yes, we're bringing into place a greater diversity of panelists for you all to enjoy over the latter months of this year. So you may at some point, sadly, tune in the hope of seeing me, and I won't be here.
No, Matt.
I know.
Occasion that will be.
I'm sure the negative reviews will flood in on us. But yeah, as mentioned, my name is Matt. I'm head of research at UniAdmissions, and so my job is to make sure that everything that we recommend in these webinars and everywhere else in our work is spot on factual stuff that we can back up with a graph. And that's something we take really seriously as a company, because it would be really easy to say any old stuff about how to succeed in these processes, whereas we take a great deal of pride in making sure that the things we suggest are, to the best of our knowledge, true. So this week we're going to be talking about becoming a doctor. Next week we're going to talk about becoming a lawyer. And the following week we're going to talk about disappointing your parents. No, we probably won't talk about that. But yeah, doctors this week, lawyers next week. We're going to be talking about the process of becoming a doctor. The good news is, if you're planning to become one, you are in exactly the right place and exactly the right time. We're going to be talking about why it is you might want to study medicine, what it takes to get in, and what we can do to help. So why medicine? Why would you want to study medicine? So loads of people do. There's a record number of people who were accepted onto medicine courses in the last cycle, and a record number of applications in the new cycle as well. People are absolutely dying to become doctors and nurses. Quite why? I don't know. It's an enormous mystery to me. Can't think of anything that's happened that might have motivated people, but that is the way that they're feeling at the moment. So there is an absolutely colossal number of people trying to become doctors. Now that brings us very early on in this presentation to the pie chart of all things. So if you're thinking of how to join this large group of students who are accepted onto medicine courses, we have a sort of a vision of how to kind of balance your time. I don't know which of the Wills would like this one. Are you well practiced on this Will patch?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
Also quite shocked, Matt, that the pie chart has come in so early. I was expecting a good 10 minutes or so.
No, I like to keep you on your toes.
Oof, wow, yeah, I'll be sweating any moment now, I think. So yeah, so okay, here is the pie chart, and this kind of gives a rough weighting of the different parts of the application and the kind of importance of the different parts. So yeah, so having a look at this, so you'll see that the exam grades are in blue, the interview is in grey, the admissions tests in orange, and everything else in yellow. So firstly, what you can see from this pie chart is that the exam grades actually a smaller, so the weighting is actually smaller than the interview and the admissions tests. Now, this is really important because I speak to students pretty much on a daily basis who think, look, I've got really good exam grades. I did really well at GCSEs, really well or I'm predicted at least to do very well at my A levels. Surely I'm fine. That unfortunately isn't the case. Okay, you have to be doing really well at the tests, so the UCAD and the Bmat. As you can see, that is worth more, and the same with the interview as well. Now, in terms of everything else, that would be the personal statement, the school reference, the extracurriculars, the work experience, all the kind of other parts. Now, again, I speak to students every day who tend to be focusing a lot more on the work experience and the personal statement side of things. That's actually the smallest part of the application. So yes, it's important, but this is just to give you a general idea of where you need to be putting your effort. So firstly, the entrance exams, extremely important. Okay. And then of course the interviews as well.
Thanks, Will. Often people ask why it is that the exam grades end up being so low weighted here, and the simple answer to that is pretty much everyone who applies to get to study medicine has some pretty good exam grades, and so the better the average level of the grades is, the less useful they are from the perspective of the university. You know, if you were to draw an analogy, go and visit, say, a basketball team, and you wanted to find out what a tall person was like, you end up with terrible evidence because they would all be tall. Similarly, if you want to find out what which of the people in your sort of application said is going to be the best doctor, looking at the grades isn't necessarily going to be helpful because they're all going to have good grades, and so the sort of the informative capacity of the grades becomes much smaller. So yeah, to talk about starting off, as we said, you're going to want some good GCSEs, very good, ideally. Our data shows a really strong correlation between GCSE performance, particularly for Oxford and Cambridge, and success in applying for medicine. Stronger than you would expect. I'll have to send those graphs over to me, Will, again, so that I can add them to this presentation at some point. You would want at least 3 STEM A-levels for most medical schools. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about A-level subjects. And I know from recent stories in the news that a lot of students have discovered that they've been much more limited in their university choices because of the bad advice they were given by schools about A-levels. So we're going to try and avoid that here. You want that work experience that Will talked about in medicine or care. Again, this can be really broad. It doesn't, you know, you don't need to have gone and done work experience in a open heart surgery theatre, going and working in, you know, a local old people's home or something like that, to really get a sense of whether you want to be in the medicine business is also going to be fine. You want to be predicted at 3 A's in your O-levels at least, and you want to do well on the UCAT and Bmat. So Will, I know you have a lot of experience talking to students. Will, could you talk a little bit about choosing your A-levels for me?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, obviously I rarely tell students what they have to be studying, but obviously it's important to be able to give them a sense as to what their option, what kind of impact their options make further down the line. And very often students will be keen, let's say they're only doing 3 A-levels, they may be keen not to only be doing sciences, you know, and that's fine. I'm a pretty firm believer that you should do the subjects that you enjoy and find interesting. And they'll often say to me, well, can I get away with just doing chemistry, maths, and then doing my other passion, which is geography? The truth is that you can, and there will be, you know, there will be a set of universities which accept that. But equally, there will be a set of universities which don't, and so you will be limiting yourself. And so yeah, it says here you definitely need chemistry. So most universities either ask for definitely at least chemistry and then another science, or ask for definitely biology and another science. So you're going to have to do definitely one of them. If you want to play your cards completely safe, biology, maths, chemistry are a pretty good set of 3 A-levels, but equally it might be that, like I said, you do have that interest somewhere else, and then you might think about doing a 4th A-level if that is something which is going to be beneficial for you and something that you can fit in, and doesn't mean that you're not going to do as well on your other grades. You always need to be thinking about you've got a set amount of time to be able to do all this stuff. Unlike most other people in your year, in your class, they don't have interviews to be getting ready for. They don't have UCATs and Bmats to be getting ready for. So you are taking on all this extra work. So you need to be sensible about doing a 4th A level as well. So yeah, as a minimum, most students are either doing chemistry and maths or biology and maths. But if you want to keep as many options open as possible, biology, chemistry, maths is a pretty good combination. And it's worth saying, for the people who are thinking of only doing biology, maths, or chemistry, maths, and then something else, have a good idea as to what how you're limiting yourself before you make that decision. Because you might say to me, well, I can only choose 4 medical schools, so I don't need to have all these options open. But if you find out when it comes to choosing medical schools that somewhere like Imperial won't accept you because of decisions you made a year ago, that's going to be pretty disappointing. So it's always important to have a really good sense when you are choosing A levels, if you are going to make that decision to not do 3 science A levels, have a good understanding as to what you'd be missing. And if you're not missing anything, then then it's a more, or not necessarily a more sensible decision, but a less not sensible decision. Nice double negative there. But yeah, it's always worth a conversation. It's always worth getting a full understanding as to what impact your decision is going to make. It's not the case that I say to everyone as a blanket policy, you should all be doing maths, biochem, because it's not necessarily the case for everyone.
Yeah, there were 2 things I wanted to add to that. First off, as Will says, it's really important to make sure you pick the A levels you're going to want to do. And so if that does mean just doing, say, biology, chemistry, and history, that's fine. However, the challenge there is that the stuff you're learning in chemistry isn't going to help you a great deal in history. And so you're going to end up increasing the workload because there isn't going to be any overlap between your subjects. Whereas if you were doing, say, physics and maths, you'll find that physics is basically all maths. The other thing to add here is if you want to become a doctor, but you also don't want to do any biology, the bad news is when you get to university to become a doctor, you're going to have to do some biology. So you might not take a biology A level and you can get away with that, but you're still going to have to learn all that biology once you get there. And so you're only going to be avoiding it for a couple of years at most. And that's probably not the world's best strategy because, of course, you're going to then have to try and learn it in a hurry relative to other people. So
another thing that's worth saying, actually, and this is less relevant to trying to get into medical school, but sort of helping you whilst you're there, the A level that medics find is sort of they use the most in their first couple of years is chemistry. So having done A level chemistry will mean that you're not having to play catch up. Whereas if you haven't, you are going to have to put a bit more work in once you're there to make sure that you can understand everything.
Yeah. So there you go. So the next thing we want to talk about was work experience. So as I said, you do need to do some work experience. It doesn't need to be in a hospital. You don't need to follow a GP around. If you can find anything that's related to science or care in general, that's going to be absolutely fine. In some respects, finding something that is sort of grim in the care industry is probably for the best. If you still want to be a doctor after you've spent, say, 6 weeks wiping old people's bottoms, that's going to stick much more than if you've spent 6 weeks doing something glamorous in a laboratory. You really want to check you want to be a doctor. Now, of course, with the pandemic, many fewer people have work experience. It's become much more difficult to get. Now, that means that it is slightly less important in the grand scheme of things because people are adjusting their expectations. But at the same time, it means that if you have got that good quality work experience, it's going to make you stand out from the pack even more than it would have done before. And that is where it becomes really worthwhile looking at broader spectrum of opportunities, things like care work, things like, even just volunteering as a steward at your local vaccine centre. Things like that are all going to be useful. It's not all about, going and meeting the most prestigious person at the Royal College of Surgeons. It's about demonstrating that you actually want to be a doctor. Because this is the most important thing about work experience. It's entirely possible that you will think you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist or any of these things, and you'll try it out and you'll go, this is awful, I hate this. And it's so much better if you discover that when you're 17 than when you're 27. It's going to save you loads of time, loads of money, loads of heartache. So if you're thinking about becoming a doctor, do your very best to find out through work experience that you do. Because if you don't actually want to become a doctor, it's going to be really annoying later when you discover you don't want to be a doctor and you already are one. So we've sort of talked about the sort of the big picture stuff. What does it take to get into medical school? So the first thing is there are tests. Well, apparently on the next slide, oh no, sorry, there are tests. The first test we're going to talk about is the Bmat, because I put these in alphabetical order rather than chronological order, which I'm not sure about. So the Bmat is the biomedical admissions test. It's required for Cambridge and Oxford, Imperial, Leeds, UCL, and a few others. So a lot of the top universities use the Bmat. It takes 2 hours. It's written on paper. It was on computers this last cycle. That did not go well. And so I think the chances of it being on computers again next year are very slim. I think they will do everything they possibly can to avoid it. And given this is a test that's not for months yet, I think they will probably succeed. So it tests both verbal and numerical reasoning. So that's questions around logic and also questions around simple maths problems. But it also tests you on actual science, sections on biology, chemistry, and physics. And there's an essay at the end. This makes it different from the UCAT, as it is much more a test of knowledge than it is a test of kind of thinking skills. The Bmat is pretty hard. You get a very small number of people who get close to the top marks in the Bmat. And this year, unlike last year, and indeed in previous years, it will only be on once. So Will, can you, either Will, whoever gets in first, can you tell us a little bit about the implications of the Bmat only being on once this year?
So I'll take that one. So basically, it depends a bit, because for certain applicants, it doesn't make any difference. Most Bmat universities will let you take the Bmat in either of the sittings. Very often students will sit at early September. But if you are applying to Oxford, they only let you sit the November sitting. So regardless of the fact that earlier sittings have been cancelled, it would be the same for those people. For the people who were applying to Leeds or UCL or Imperial and were hoping to get it done in September, what this means is you have to make your application and choose your medical schools before knowing what your Bmat score is or how well you've done. So it is a bit of a gamble, and you want to make sure that you prepare well enough to make sure it's a gamble which pays off. You'll know your UCAT score because you get that immediately. So you'll have that in hand when deciding which medical schools to apply to. So, you know, if the UCAT's gone spectacularly well, you might apply to just one Bmat school. Whereas if it's gone worse, you might apply to 2, potentially even 3. But it wouldn't be sensible to apply to exclusively Bmat universities, because, you know, as with anything, you can prepare and prepare and prepare, and the test might not go as well as you anticipate. You don't want to leave yourself at the end of this process with no options. Now, of course, that isn't what we plan for, and it's not what we hope for, but there's no sense in being careless. As with anything at this competitive, you don't want to be missing out just because of a poor decision more than anything else. So yeah, there's quite a big implication, and the implications of doing well in the Bmat are pretty huge. The stuff the graphs that Matt was referring to earlier was about Oxford medical admissions, and basically those who scored in the top 25% of the Bmat all got offers, or all got interviews, and pretty much all of them got offers. So there's a very, very strong relationship between doing well in this test and being deemed a good candidate by these universities.
Yeah, thanks. So you touched briefly there on the great competitor to the Bmat, which is the University Clinical Aptitude Test. So this is what they use at King's College London, Exeter, Glasgow, Keele, and a bunch of others. It's also 2 hours long, but it's on a computer. And the UCAT is different for everyone who takes it. So there are, I don't know, say 80 questions on the UCAT. I can't remember exactly how many there are off the top of my head. They will be drawn from a pool of hundreds of questions, so that your exam will be unique compared to anyone else's. This is unlike the Bmat, which is just one exam that everyone has to do on that one day in November. And as an aptitude test, the UCAT is much weirder. It has the verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, so the maths and English effectively components of it. But it also has decision-making and situational judgment sections, which are much more to do with understanding what processes to follow, understanding how things are done in the medical profession. And it also has abstract reasoning, which is a set of confusing pictures where you have to try and figure out patterns from arrows doing stuff. It's very exciting. I'm no good at it at all. But the UCAT in particular is an exam where revision can really pay off, because if you go in there not having done any revision, you're going to be very surprised by the content of the UCAT.
For people who are very unfamiliar with these kind of things, it's often likened to the kind of 11+ reasoning tests that lots of kids do. The main difference being, obviously, it's a bit trickier, but also the time constraints on it. So in a number of these sections, you'll be doing multiple questions a minute, and just sort of getting through the reading plus understanding plus working out what those shapes are. It's quite a stretch to be able to do it all on time. And obviously this can be combated by going into it knowing exactly what you're doing. But lots of people underestimate this test. There's lots of ideas about how long you should take to prepare for these kind of things, but what you don't want to do is walk into it and not even be able to finish. That's going to be really, really disappointing, and you aren't going to be able to do yourself justice in terms of how well you can perform. So don't leave it to chance on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Will.
Just to jump in there, Will. I'm not sure if you've heard this. Quite a few students have said to me recently that they're actually being advised that they start studying 4 to 6 weeks before the test. I find that quite shocking personally, because sure, maybe some students can still do very well, but most students, you absolutely need to be doing more than 4 to 6 weeks work on the tests.
Yeah.
So inevitably, at the other end of this process, we always get quite a few students saying, well, someone told me I could do it in a couple of weeks and I couldn't. And then they have to, reapply or do something else.
Yeah, I mean, as with anything, if you're told that it'll take 6 weeks, the best way to perform well is to take more than 6 weeks over it. So we were talking a little bit about the impact these exams have. So one of the data projects I was involved in last year was to try and figure out the weight the Bmat actually had for admissions decisions. So we got this lovely set of data from UCL showing that the average score for the Bmat as a whole last year was 4.5. Conveniently, this is actually 1 column per question, this graph. So if I count it back, I can tell you that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the average score was 17 out of 32. You get a little bit of bunching at the end because it's a multiple choice exam. So 17 out of 32 in section 1 was the average score for everyone who sat it. 19 out of 32 was the average score for someone who applied to UCL. And then a further 3 points, so a 22 out of 32 is the score that we're projecting to be the average for someone who gets in. Now, I don't know if this data is news to you, Will, but 3 questions. It's not much, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, particularly just as I was talking about earlier, not finishing, even just leaving a couple questions at the end that you don't get round to, what a difference that could make for your application in terms of, maybe just putting you over the edge to get to interview and then being able to demonstrate how good a candidate you are there. It's usually pretty tight. And just looking at how nicely distributed the grades are, I think for the section 2, it's often skewed one way or the other. But yeah, it's usually pretty slim. You want to make sure that you're not missing things for really avoidable reasons.
Yes. Yeah, I did produce a version of this for section 2, but the data doesn't present as nicely because of the there's greater variability in the section 2 outcomes for some reason, and so you don't get this clean effect showing how big a difference each of those correct answers makes. You know, each of those correct answers is lifting you above another 5% of the test taking population, and just 2 or 3 of them is taking you from being average to a doctor in effect, which is a huge impact for what might only be, you know, an extra week of revision. So after you've done the test, you've done marvelously. With any luck, you're going to get an interview. So what happens in the interview? So there are 2 kinds of, broadly speaking, medicine interviews. There's the kind of classic Oxbridge style one, which Will is going to talk about in a moment. But the sort of more modern style of interview is what's called an MMI. This is where they give you as many as 10 miniature interviews, often back to back. So each one of these will be on a different subject, trying to test you in a different area of sort of medical practice. And this is based on the idea that this is basically what being a doctor is like. If you end up working as a GP, which obviously is the job that most doctors, is the most common job among doctors, you'll have one person who'll come in with a problem with their feet, one person who'll come in with a problem with their nose, one person who has a problem to their mental health and something to do with pregnancy. You're going to have a wide range of things happening, one after the other. And so this is intended to test you on that sort of thing. So a lot of them will involve kinds of role play. I'll be testing your professional judgment, making sure that you know how to make the right ethical decision in certain situations, figuring out how to prioritize different cases, obviously very important at the moment. Make sure that you know how to give and take instructions, that you can understand processes, make sure that you can analyze data. You know, if you've got a blood test back and you're having to talk to a patient about it. And broadly speaking, this kind of problem-based learning where you are tested in your ability to learn through being faced with a real life medical problem rather than starting entirely from theory. So we've got a couple of these I've pulled out as kind of tests. So I'm going to find out from you guys what you would do. So if you want to alternate, starting with Will P, can you think of any technological advances that have changed medical practice?
So how long have we got for me to go?
Come on, just get one will do.
Well, I suppose since the pandemic, most GPs now you have telephone consultations first, and kind of online. So I've heard of people sending pictures.
Yeah, I've done that. I had a problem with one of my feet that I've had dealt with through sending photos on my phone, which felt rather naughty, really, sending doctors pictures of what turned out to be a broken toe. But you know, it was fine, and it does enable doctors to do things quicker and without dragging people into the surgery. Will, can you tell us about the worries of alcohol in the context of working as a doctor?
Yeah, so and this one comes up on the SJT sometimes as well. Just trying to remember what the 5 different options are in those examples. Generally, I think the practice is to speak to the doctor themselves before then sort of escalating things. But, you know, the idea is not to just ignore it or, you know, show up next Monday morning smelling of alcohol as well, so you can fit in.
And then we have a couple of I'll let you guys off these few. We have a couple of the sort of trickier questions here. So one of the things interviewers will try and do when you're applying for medicine is trick you into behaving in an arrogant sort of way, and that's what these next 2 questions are about. You know, do doctors hold a special position in society? And of course, the answer is yes, they do. They want you to show that you're interested in being a doctor for the right reasons, not because you want to be an important person who people expect. And of course, this is where the question about nurses comes in, as the question will sometimes be, why do you want to be a doctor instead of a nurse? In the hope of tricking you into going, oh, well, nurses are rubbish and it's for girls. I'm a big, strong boy. I want to be a doctor. Incorrect answer. No, nurses are important for a range of reasons. And so you want to strike a balance between saying you'd like to be a doctor rather than a nurse, but being a nurse is also good.
My partner's currently working on ITU wards, and it's very, very apparent how important nurses are to the whole process. Their use and importance cannot be understated.
Yeah. And of course, questions about your work experience, and that could even be just as simple as asking you about charity work. Again, it doesn't need to be a question about the open heart surgery that you observed while you were at the theatre, or the groundbreaking vaccine that you helped develop. It could be as simple as, you know, how does your charity work at the food bank make you feel? Getting at that sense of empathy that's so important for people who are working in medicine. So I'm now sort of going to throw over control to the two Wills, as I've done my little bit, talking through the work I've done and the ideas we have about how to put together an effective application. And they're going to tell you in more detail about how we can help in the context of our programs. So if you just shout next slide, as the cliche goes, Will, I'll leave you two to it for a minute.
Will Patch, I'll let you take charge on this one.
Okay, sure. So next slide. Oh, look at that. Yeah, perfect. So is this the next slide? Ah, okay. Sure. So I mean, just kind of starting at the beginning, the first process for us really would be to have a chat, you know, to the student, also to the parent later on as well, just to establish the kind of current situation where you currently are with the application process, areas that you're struggling with, and just to make sure that there is a fit between kind of the help that we can give and the kind of help that you're looking for. A big thing that we're looking for as well is attitude. So having the skills and ability is one part of the puzzle, but having the attitude is super important for us as well. You have to be motivated, determined. This has to be really something that you're looking for. So we'd have a consultation and we'd have a chat and just kind of make sure that there's a fit there. Will?
Yeah, so obviously once you've established which program would be sensible, it's important for the students to have a good sense of what they're getting into, really. So effectively our programs are made up of 4 key parts, and these sort of interact with each other as a means to support a student properly through the year. So the first part here is our materials and resources. It's really important that students have the right tools to get the job done. What this means is we've made our own, well, quite a selection of textbooks, materials, video lectures, lots and lots of different things to make sure that a student has everything they need to be able to practice for the tests, put together something respectable for their personal statements, and start getting an understanding of what's expected of them at interview, and you know, really help them do that side of the work themselves. But we, generally speaking, don't just let the student get on with it on their own. Of course, it's important for them to be able to be self-driven and to, you know, be a self-motivated academic, because they'll need to be once they're at university. But it's not just the materials that they'll be working on. Can you go to the next slide, please, Matt? But before we get on to that, we'll show you the prep portal. Have we still got the video for this? We do.
Oh yes, it's still a terrifying video, I'm afraid.
Why did we get rid of it? But
yes,
yeah,
so, as Will will ably demonstrate in a moment, it's not just the textbooks. We also have the prep portal, which is a fully online tool, which is now going to do a very fast running preview, which Will is going to try and keep up with. Go.
Yeah. So obviously, whenever you prepare for something, whenever you prepare for an exam, you sort of want to learn the content, practice it, learn it, practice it, focus on areas you're struggling with. So this should demonstrate how students do that with our online materials at least. So the first part would be to actually understand what the test is asking of you, going through the kind of questions that are coming up, how to solve them, and how to, get around them. And then once you have a clear understanding of that, it's really important to test yourself. Go through the motions of doing practice questions, get into the habit of, getting used to working with multiple choice, because most students don't have those in their A-level exams. And getting more and more experience handling different questions and learning how to apply what you know from what you've learned to these different scenarios that are presented to you. And once you've done plenty of that, you then move into the mock paper stage. So sitting down, giving yourself 2 hours to go through a whole paper, seeing how you manage with the timing, see how you manage with keeping up the stamina to be able to just keep going through questions. And one benefit of having it done on an online platform is, I remember when I was always preparing for exams, you'd have to go back through all your practice papers and see if you've been improving and see if there's particular areas where you need to focus your time on the most, whereas this can keep track of all that for you, so you can see if you're getting better or if perhaps a bit worryingly you're getting worse. And then naturally you can target what you're doing based on that. Okay.
Thank you. Well done for keeping up.
Along with the video as well. You'd have thought I'd been practicing that.
One day I should just let you make a recording. So that brings us on to the enrichment. So obviously the resources are available to you whenever you want, but the enrichment is available to you once a week. Tomorrow, I believe, Will, right?
Yeah, so there will be a seminar tomorrow. I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head what the topic is for the medics, but we have these classes running weekly across a number of different subjects. Using medicine as an example, the idea of it is to help students explore their degree, their topic, in a much higher level than they've been doing so far. Getting involved with current topics in the NHS, getting involved with medical developments, and being taught about all these different things. Now, no student is interested in everything. There's bound to be certain weeks where there are topics which are more interesting for individual applicants and more interesting for others. But that's the point. Each seminar will come with further reading and suggestions for things to be doing if that is a topic that you enjoy. And if you're doing this on a weekly basis, then by the end of the year, you've developed a set of subject areas where you've got a serious amount of expertise, as well as developing a broad peripheral understanding of a huge number of topics relevant to the field of medicine. Now, this is quite a few helpful applications in the application, well, in the university application itself, because it means you're going to be a lot more confident in the interview setting, and it means you're going to have a lot more to be able to talk about. But there's also things that you'll be able to put on your personal statement. It might be that there's a seminar that you go to 1 week that then sparks a bit of interest and you do some research into it, and that then turns into applying for a particular internship. And these kind of things, it's all about getting deeper and deeper into your subject, so that when we get to them having to decide if you're really genuine about this or not, it's apparent to them that you are interested. It's apparent to them that you are keen. Unlike most students who might spend their weekends or their summer holidays running around doing whatever kids do these days, you're there learning about medicine. You're in a hospital. You're on your computer. You're reading books, and the seminars really are there as a springboard to help students get into that more and more. Next slide.
Thanks. Yeah, we even have a little clip actually of one of our admissions, one of our enrichment teams saying what Will said, but they're in a video.
And they're actual medics, so
Well, that's true. They are much more credible.
Makes it more authority.
The aims of these whole enrichment is supposed to be 24, it's supposed to guide you throughout your application with your wider reading. So everyone knows that you have to do wider reading to support your medical application, to sort of demonstrate that you have an insight into medicine. But the other thing that these enrichment supervisions will do is supposed to help you increase your confidence in discussing these different aspects of the wider, because that's what you're going to be asked to do at interview. So I think the best place to start building up your confidence is probably on here and talking in this group. And hopefully throughout all of the wider reading that we'll be doing with you, you'll be feeling a bit more prepared for life as a medical student and as a doctor as well.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I certainly don't have such nice hair.
I don't know why you always make me say it, Matt, when we've got it perfectly demonstrated in that.
Maybe we'll have to change that for next week. I'll send you over the recording studio kit.
Yeah.
So that brings us on to the subject of day courses.
Yeah, Will, why don't you tell them about the day courses?
Yeah, sure. So the day courses, or the intensive courses, these tend to kick in as we're coming up towards the key milestones. So students would have already been preparing for the application, and then when we're coming up to key milestones, so let's say usually 2 weeks or so before the application is due, 2 weeks before you sit the test, 2 weeks before the interview as well, you'll then be part of the day courses. Now these are those final pushes to flush out any issues that you might be having, to make sure that you're fully confident with the process and that you're kind of fully ready to go. I know the last year, well, they were virtual. Do we have any word yet about the ones this year? I know that we are looking to see if they'll be face to face again, right?
Yes, so we had, I mean, last year we had everything set up so we could run them at LSE, but then naturally it wasn't really sensible to be bringing all these different people from across the country during a lockdown. So that did have to run virtually. Generally speaking, we enjoy running these in person, so if we can, we will. And if we do run them in person, then we also run, we make sure that for our international students or our students slightly further away, they're still able to get all the the materials from it and have an online alternative. But we have to make a judgment call about that closer to the time. If we can run it in person, we will. Otherwise, it might be that it has to be run virtually. And whilst things are looking good, I always err on the side of skepticism for these kind of things, just so that we don't end up being disappointed again like we were last year.
Yeah, but even if they are virtual, there's still lots and lots of value there. I believe the ones last year were kind of very well received. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And this kind of takes us on to the kind of final element, really, the one-to-one tuition. Now, here what we'd look to do is, so let's say your first choice is study medicine at Cambridge. We would get a tutor for you who is either currently studying medicine at Cambridge or has very recently graduated. Now, this person would be your personal mentor through the entire application process. So why is this important? Firstly, this person obviously has been there, done it, they know exactly what it takes. Also, one big thing that I keep getting from students is that they're a bit confused about the whole process, about the structure. They don't really know what to do or kind of when to do it. This will take out all the guesswork. This will give you that structure. And secondly, this is bespoke to you. So this tutor will be your, as I said, personal mentor. If you're struggling with certain elements of the application process, let's say certain sections on the test, on the UCAD or the Bmat, this is really here to help you. This tutor can help you flush out those issues and make sure that you're presenting the kind of strongest possible application. And we see lots of good results from the one-to-one tuition as well. Will, anything to add?
Oh, sorry, I was
You were muted.
cut off. So yeah, a couple of things to sort of add on to this. Now, obviously, the value of this one-to-one tuition is huge, but one of the challenges we've experienced in the past is the failure of the students to communicate it to any parents who might be listening. And so we do make sure that there is a PDF report that is sent to every parent and student after each of these sessions, making sure that they know what's been going on. So this means that not only are you tracking your progress in a really thorough way, but also if your teenager is in the habit of just walking past and go, "Oh, fine, leave me alone," you're going to find out through the PDF anyway. So that saves
I think your impersonations of young people get worse and worse each week.
This is not an impersonation. This is a reconstruction of my youngest.
I understand. Okay.
And the good news is that all of this does pay off. We're really proud of our success rate, which remains around 3 times that of the national success rate, and which compares really well. I've pulled out the data here from Oxford, really flatteringly with some of the schools in the UK that send the most students and certainly send in the most applications. So we're really proud to be more successful than Eton when it comes to getting kids into Oxford and Cambridge, although we do admit that our sporting facilities and architecture are very much lacking by comparison. So
is this the 2019 or the 20, have they updated it for 2020, Matt?
This is still the 19 data because we won't get acceptance data through until after the A levels.
Okay. Sorry.
Because accept is when they say accept, they actually matriculate. It's annoying, but
yeah, I got excited there. I thought we had new information. Sorry.
No, sadly not. It's the information poor time of year. This is something that will allude to earlier in terms of our kind of student selection process. But if you'd like to pick this up, Will.
You need to use our surnames, Matt.
I was going to say, which one?
Whichever.
Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So as Matt said, I did mention this earlier, attitude is absolutely a key thing that we're looking for, because, for example, I have spoken to students, quite a few students who have been kind of straight A students. They've had all 9s of GCSEs predicted for A's and A stars. They've basically, you could argue, verging on kind of a bit arrogant, a bit cocky, and they think, look, this is in the bag. I don't really have to do much here. Whereas I've spoken on the flip side of the coin, I've spoken to students who maybe still been quite strong, but not as strong, but their attitude has been really on point. They have been very focused. They've been very determined. This is absolutely something that they want. And these students tend to put in more work, more effort. They tend to be, just doing basically whatever it takes. And these sorts of students in general do tend to be more successful. So attitude, absolutely crucial for us. This is, again, why we have these consultations. This is why we speak to students, because we have to make sure that the attitude is there and that they would be a suitable fit for one of our programs. Because just going back to the previous slide that Matt mentioned, with our success rates, there are 2 reasons for this. Number 1 is what we do works. There's no doubt about that. But number 2 is the student has to work as well. So if there's a mismatch there, then yeah, it wouldn't really be the sort of student that we're looking for. Will, anything to add?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Cool. Matt, are you still there?
Yes, sorry, I've been having trouble with my bandwidth, so I'm trying to keep myself off screen.
That old chestnut.
Bandwidth and my looks. So yeah, and one of the ways, as Will talked about, that we sort of try to ensure this all happens is through what we call the Student Honour Code, and this is a very simple little agreement, which first of all makes students accountable for their own learning. We give them sort of targets that they need to be hitting to succeed at the rates that we're hoping for them to, and make sure the students take full advantage of the resources that we provide them with. And it also frees up the tutors that we bring in to focus on teaching, not on paperwork or emails. I'd like to talk about one of the tutors I've had the most contact with is an Oxford PhD mathematician, absolute genius, terrible at emails. And so I try to make sure that for him and for other people like him, who are fantastic teachers but very poor quality administrators, that we're putting them in charge of teaching and not in charge of doing admin. And that's both about making sure that we get the very best out of the tutors, but also about demonstrating respect for them, their time, their capabilities. And that's a useful bit of learning for later life, regardless of how things finish. Now, people broadly like what we do. Please do drop us a review on Trustpilot. Here are 2. I will leave you to review them on the site proper rather than dwelling on them now. Obviously, if you have things nice to say about me or about Will or about other Will, do mention us in the Trustpilot reviews, and that'll get us some brownie points back at work. Now, we appreciate that everything that we put forward is a lot, and so we do offer what we a 2-week trial. That means that if you join one of our programs and within the first 2 weeks you discover that it's a bad fit, that's fine. You can walk away, no questions asked. And this is to make sure that we have a really good match between the parent and the student and the program. It only happens very occasionally, but we don't want to be working with people who don't want to work with us, and vice versa. So that's why we have that trial in place.
Yeah, equally, you know, part of it as well as consultants, you know, in education, we do our best to understand the needs of the student and make the most relevant recommendation. That doesn't mean that we're infallible, and sometimes, you know, we make recommendations for students who aren't quite right for it, or, you know, the recommendation isn't quite right for the student, and we don't want to be either, you know, having a student in a program that they don't want to be doing, or having a student in a program which isn't quite right for them. So you know, it's pretty important.
Yeah, thanks. The final thing to add before we go to the questions is that if you're worried about money, I haven't seen anyone ask about costs yet, but it has always come up. If you are worried about costs, chances are we are also worried about costs. We don't want money to be a barrier to anyone who wants to come and work with us. That's why we have what we call the UniAdmissions Foundation, which is a fully registered charity arm of the business that works with students coming from less advantaged backgrounds. We worked with nearly 100 students last year. The target is to more than double that this year. And the subsequent target is for that to be 1 student that we deal with on a subsidized basis for every student we deal with on a paid for basis in 2022. A target that felt a lot further away last year, but it's something we're really proud of. So if you're worried about the cost, please don't let that stop you getting in touch with us, because as I say, chances are if you're worried about the cost, then we're worried about you.
It's also worth saying, you know, if you're at a school which has lots of people who want to study medicine, but the school generally, you know, doesn't have the funding to help support you with it, and it is struggling financially, we do sign up schools straight through to the foundation. So we've got one school which will send pretty much all their applicants through getting support from us. And, you know, obviously, if you could benefit from the support, then it's likely that you've got friends as well who could. And if we can support them all for free, then that's great. And we can hit our targets of helping 250 students, which is a big ask.
Yeah. As Will says, the challenge we found isn't finding the money, it's finding the students. And so if you are uncertain, please do let us know. Please do get in touch. We are, if anything, keener on recruiting than we are on saving money on this one. It would be a pity to leave the budget on the table. So please do get in touch. That brings us to the Q&A. Let's see what we've got. In the background, there should be running now a very cute little animation of how to go about booking a consultation with us. So if you want to get in touch, you want to ask us questions, you want to book it into a program, this is the starting point. It's to get in touch with us, have a conversation on the phone, and for us to get a really good detailed sense of what it is that you're looking for, and so we can properly match you with the program. So let's kick off with some questions. Taha Contractor. It's an unusual surname, but I guess you must work at Taha. Asks, could you talk about grade requirements for international students doing the IB? Will, I know you have a lot of experience dealing with the IB, right?
Yes, so it'll vary a bit from university to university. Generally at the top end, if we're taking out sort of all the theory of knowledge stuff and grading out of 42, the highest entry requirements for medical school are sort of 39, 40. So if you're getting 41, 40, you know that you're meeting the minimum entry requirements that the universities have. As you go down to sort of slightly less competitive universities, it does drop as well. So it's, you know, sort of 38 down to 36 as well. And of course, you'll be able to make an informed decision in terms of where you apply based on what kind of grades you think you'll be achieving. If we compare it to A levels, you know, if you know that you're on track for 3 A's at A level, then you're probably going to be applying to universities that have those requirements. Whereas if you're on track for A-star AA, you'll probably apply mostly to universities for A-star AA, and then maybe another university with 3 A's just in case there's an issue with your A-level grades later on. Equally for IB, it's sensible to do something similar. You know, it's not really sensible to apply to universities which all have the same minimum IB entry requirements, because you can only firm one and back up, you know, choose one backup. So it doesn't really, you don't gain that much by not giving yourself diversity in your application portfolio.
Thanks, Will. Sticking with let's see. Yeah. So sticking with sort of subject choice questions, Saisha asks, does taking additional mathematics during one's GCSEs help with BMAT or UCAT or even medicine in general? Yeah. And we sort of touched on this earlier when we talked about whether or not to take biology at A level. The thing is, whether you take biology at A level or not, you're going to have to learn that biology. Whether you take advanced maths or not, you're going to have to learn the maths. And so we always recommend doing it sooner rather than later. So I would say in some respects, the ideal A-level combination for medicine would probably be biology, chemistry, maths, further maths, actually.
It is, so in terms of your maths won't really make any significant difference to the UCAT. In terms of the BMAT, for section 2, a simplified version of the sort of difficulty of it is it's hard questions about GCSE content. So if you have done pretty well at maths and you've done extra work at maths at the GCSE level, then it is going to help, and it's certainly not going to hurt.
Yeah. Always better to be really good at maths, I think, is the message. Yeah. Zach Islam has asked, what about Oxford? I think this is back in reference to the... It's
difficult to remember, isn't it?
Yes. Back in reference to the admissions tests earlier on. So yeah, Oxford used the BMAT in terms of applying for medicine, and now there's only that one date. So you will have to commit to Oxford before you put in the application. And as everyone knows, you can only pick one of Oxford or Cambridge when applying. That's useful to bear in mind. Sort of staying on Oxbridge, Azali writes, do tutors know about specific Oxford colleges and how to tactically apply to a college? Will, tell us about tactical applications.
Yeah, tactical applications. So generally, I'm relatively against tactical applications. I can understand why people want to do them, but if you think about it, I doubt many people will be able to outsmart the admissions tutors at, you know, these universities. That they generally know what they're doing. If you're a strong enough candidate for somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge, you will get in. And on the flip side, if you're not a strong enough candidate for these universities, you're not going to sneak in by the college that you've chosen. They run what's called pooling, and basically this means that if there is a college which just in any given year is oversubscribed with particularly strong candidates, which is bound to happen just by chance, then those students who don't quite make the cut for that college are pulled to other more lowly subscribed colleges. So it does mean that you're unlikely to miss out because of your college choice, and you're also unlikely to sort of get super far just based on it alone. But there are some smaller differences that are worth thinking about in terms of your application. But generally, we encourage students to choose college based on where they want to study, where they want to live. That's a really important thing to be bearing in mind. And it's important that you apply to a college which fits for you. And of course, tutor will support the student with that. It's often a very difficult decision because there's so many good choices. So students will go through that with their tutor. We also have a book related to choosing colleges, and we also run a half-day course to help students sort of work in groups to work out whether or not a particular college is right for them.
Thanks, Will, and thank you for plugging my book.
You're welcome.
It's much slicker when someone other than me mentions my book. Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is to say, if you are really absolutely have your heart set on making a tactical choice, I would say look at the colleges that are less famous, that are less pretty. Look at perhaps one of the PPHs, Regent's Park, somewhere like that. And a lot of this data is available on the Oxford website, and you can trawl through it yourself if you're really keen. But as Will says, ultimately, you're not going to be able to outsmart these people. They're pretty damn smart. That's why they're teaching at Oxford. So it's not worth putting a ton of effort into, and ultimately, it's not going to move the needle a huge amount in your application. Fun as it is to try and outthink them, though, I sympathise with that certainly.
There's the one scenario where it might make a difference is it's more an internal decision, because if you think applying to one of the very old, very prestigious, very grand colleges would sort of be a bit intimidating for you, and actually you might arrive there on interview time and think, gosh, this is all a bit beyond me, then actually it might be worth applying to somewhere slightly smaller, slightly more, slightly less intimidating, so that you're not thrown off your best performance at the interview. So genuinely, if you do feel that way about particular colleges, then that is a good reason to make a decision. But it's more for you and your own performance rather than like external to you.
The last thing to add on this is obviously when you perhaps not obviously. When you come to put in the application for Oxford or Cambridge, you do have the option to choose an open application, where the college you apply to is chosen by basically a random number generator. Now, for reasons I have never been able to get to the bottom of, people who make open applications do surprisingly poorly. Now, my guess is that this is because if you don't take the trouble to choose a college based on, half the Wikipedia page, you probably haven't put much effort into the rest of your application, and consequently it's a leading indicator rather than a causal factor. But that's just to bear in mind, the open application is there, you can use it if you want, but as a general rule, we would advise just picking one out based on, does it look, you like the name, do the colors on the crest look good? Ultimately, you don't need to have a reason that is interesting beyond what you find on the Wikipedia page for the college. And in most instances, that is the level of research I would suggest. Read the Wikipedia page, pick up our book, have a quick look on the relevant JCR website, which is the Oxford name for the student union, and don't worry about it too much. Colleges are kind of like football teams in the sense that everyone is pleased with the one they ended up supporting, regardless of which one it is.
I do think your interpretations of the data are very risky, Matt. I think there's correlation here, but I don't think that's necessarily causation in terms of open applications doing worse. I imagine it's just a correlation between people who do have the right kind of advice and support and people who don't, and people who don't are more likely to do an open application and also do less well. That's my hypothesis. We can do a conjoined research paper.
Well, I need something to keep me busy at the weekends while I wait for. Actually, no, I don't. Do I? We're getting unlocked on Monday. Oh, you should have suggested it earlier.
Yeah.
Fab. So moving on, I wanted to. Oh, Will, you've picked out a couple of questions you'd like to answer. Will P, can you answer questions from Anzelika? Apologies if I mispronounced that, and Saisha.
Yeah, of course. So I would go with Angelica for the pronunciation. I'm not sure if that's right, but she has asked, how much does a subscription to your uni admin resources cost? Now, basically, we have different programs, as we've mentioned previously. So we would have to have a consultation just to see, firstly, how much support do you need? And secondly, are you a right fit for the program? And then we could go through kind of all the details. So if anyone is interested in finding out more, certainly book a consultation. I think there'll be a page popping up at some point where you can enter your details. We can have a chat. There's obviously absolutely no obligation. We can give you advice either way on the application process. If there might be room there, so if you might be suitable for one of our programs, we can then go into more details. Okay. And there was another question here. Here we go. So from Saisha, is it? In which grade should one join the Oxbridge medical program, which is offered at UniAdmissions? So the honest answer is sooner the better. So most of our students do join us in year 12. We do have a few in kind of earlier as well, who are kind of eager beavers who really want to make sure that they're fully prepared, but most students would be year 12. Now is a good time. We have lots of students at the moment joining us. What we tend to find is that around summertime, our phone lines go absolutely crazy. And ironically, a lot of students and parents that we speak to at that time, many of them we've actually spoken to previously, but at the time they thought that it's fine, I can do this by myself. And then they get back in touch later when they realize, actually, there's a lot more work here and I'm not doing as well as I thought. So if this is something that, if you need help now, if you're struggling now, absolutely, this is something that you need to start sooner rather than later.
Fab. Thanks both. Sorry for the Excel noises. Monisha asks, do you have an A-level chemistry tutor to help in getting an A star? Absolutely. We don't specialize in A-level tuition, but if you're coming to us as part of a broader program, that's absolutely something we can help out with. We take a lot of pride in the quality of the tutors we work with. And certainly we'll be able to find someone who got an A star in chemistry, who got a first in chemistry, that sort of thing. So that shouldn't be a problem at all if you come and work with us. We have a really good tutor pool of, I believe, well over 1,000 tutors now.
Yeah, so the number keeps changing. So I've sort of given up trying to keep track. But yeah, we're often taking on new tutors in order to make sure that we've got a pretty big pool to support our students. Every student is going to, well, not every student, but most students will spend time with upwards of 5 tutors one-to-one in their program, and that's because we like them to do mock interviews with different people. So it's important for us to have quite a range of people available to be able to support students in that way.
Yeah. Thanks. Rachel Collins asks about medical school clearing. Well, this is an area I've been looking into recently, but I probably don't have as detailed knowledge as you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So obviously, you're in the position which some students are in, where they don't get offers. I'm very sorry about that. Going through clearing is possible. Yes, you can resit your UCAT and you can go through clearing with hopefully a higher UCAT score. Truthfully, I haven't heard of a huge amount of success for applicants going through clearing, but it's certainly, if you are going to go for it, then there's no harm in resitting the UCAT. Particularly, if your option, it depends a bit on what your options are, or what your son's options are, Rachel. If he's reapplying regardless, then he's going to be sitting the UCAT either way. So there's really no harm, so you may as well do it. Equally, if he's thinking, well, if I don't get anything, I'll just do biomed or whatever his fifth option is, then you may as well do the UCAT. You know, it's worth the risk. It's difficult to tell really these days how many, if any, places there will be through clearing. So last year there would have been effectively none. In most years, there's usually very few for something like medicine, and it's really difficult to know how many people are going to be above or below their predicted grades. Most people don't know this, but usually predicted grades are 80% wrong. So and that's a pretty reliable thing. So universities know that many students are, and that's 80%. You know, some can be higher, but most are lower than they're predicted. Whereas this year with the teacher assessed grades, we have no idea how many are going to be accurate to their predictions. So I can't give you an accurate sense as to what the chances will be at that point. But if you have a higher UCAT, it will only help. Yeah,
but based on the information we have from last year, all of a sudden, the predicted grades, once they were being assessed by teachers, were substantially more accurate than they had been when they were assessed by exams. An enormous mystery that I cannot account.
That's surprising. I remember, Matt, reading an article where they were saying that the given grades were about 30% inaccurate, and that was really, really bad. But everyone was ignoring the fact that predicted grades are pretty much almost always inaccurate. And so using them as an alternative is very, very dubious.
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges in the exam system, but I'm not putting on the problems with the exam system seminar this week, sadly.
Yeah, that'll have to be a two-parter, I imagine.
Yeah, that'll be for a few weeks' time. So we had a question from, this is where the Excel noises were coming from Kate Goodchild, who asked, how many Oxbridge medical applicants did you get in this year? And what is the split between Oxford and Cambridge? So our split was roughly 2 to 1, Cambridge to Oxford, which is in line with the number of places that are available. For various reasons, mostly that there is a much bigger hospital in Cambridge than there is in Oxford. Addenbrooke's is huge.
JR is big. I'm interested in seeing this hospital now.
It's huge. At any rate, there are more places available at Cambridge than at Oxford, and our run of success is roughly in share of that. We had somewhere between, because we're still finalising this data because it's difficult to get hold of people, somewhere between 20 and 30 places for Oxbridge Medicine this year, a result we're really happy with. That is in line with our previous success rates. So we're very happy with that, and hopefully some of those students will be joining us as tutors next year to share their really up-to-the-minute insights as to how the process works. Fab. Will, you had a question, Will P. You wanted to answer a question about Cambridge entrance exams.
Yeah, absolutely. So this question is from Ayad, who asks, how do you prepare for Cambridge entrance exams? So obviously it depends on the entrance exam. So there are many different ones depending on the course. If we're sticking with the medicine theme, you'd be doing the Bmat for Cambridge Medicine. Now, there are many different ways and kind of resources and things you can use. So most people would use, you know, a book maybe, or there are certain websites, YouTube videos, certain, you know, lots of things out there. One thing I'd just like to highlight is, though, we were talking earlier about the success rates. The national average for Oxbridge Medicine is just 13%. So that means 87% of those students who apply for Oxbridge Medicine do not get in. Now, pretty much all of these students would be looking at a book, or they'd be looking at a YouTube video, or they'd have some kind of online website, yet they still don't get in. So what I'd say is you need to be doing something different. This is why what we do works, because we have different parts of the program that we mentioned earlier. There's a big focus on the kind of one-to-one tuition as well, with all the resources and with the Sunday seminars and with the intensive courses combined. We find that this greatly increases your chances of getting in. So yeah, a bit of a long-winded answer, but basically you need to be doing something different from the average person.
Fab. Thanks. As Will says, it is all about putting yourself above and beyond, because they're all smart kids, and so the standard is high. Will, you had a couple you wanted to answer, and then Will, in fact, three, and then I'll come back to Ellen's question in a moment.
So one person asked, are the interviews for 2022 applications going to be conducted online or in person? The short answer is we don't know yet. My anticipation is that they will be conducted in person. One, because they're later in the year, similar to the Bmat. Two, also, whilst the Bmat has some pretty catastrophic errors last year, doing interviews online weren't overly catastrophic, but generally admissions tutors don't like it. So they will, as much as possible, try to do them in person. Hopefully we'll be hearing about that soon, but again, it could be something that we don't hear about sort of confirmed for the next few months. What is the average Bmat score for getting into Oxford and Cambridge was the next question. And actually, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link in the chat. Now this is, I hadn't realized that Ded made all this info public. I thought it was just, on a need to know basis, but actually Oxford and Cambridge generally aren't, no, that wasn't what I meant to do. They're generally pretty good at giving out certain information, and Bmat Stats, Oxford has given quite a lot of info about. So if you follow that link, that will take you to a page which tells you quite a lot about GCSE grades, but it also gives you a really nice looking graph about Bmat scores. And it gives you a very, very accurate idea as to what a difference it makes having a higher Bmat score. If you've got basically slap bang in the middle, average Bmat score, you've got what looks like less than a 5% chance of being asked to interview. Whereas if you are in the top 20%, like I was saying earlier, you've got a 100% chance of being asked to interview, which is huge. It is an incredibly important test. Naturally, when you get to that stage of being in the top 20%, there aren't many of you there. Well, only 20%. But if you can be in that cohort going into the interview, you're in a really, really strong position. So please do use that link. That should give you a really good idea of things. And of course, remember, it's always taken into account with everything else. So yes, if you're in the top 20%, you will get asked to interview, but you still aren't guaranteed an offer. You've got a very high chance of an offer, but you've still got to do well in the interview. And then the last question was about IB and not being able to do as many sciences as you might do in A-levels, and how to manage with physics. Now, I imagine this is specific to the physics in the physics part of the Bmat. If I'm wrong here, then please do just type in a different question telling me I'm wrong. But there is a physics section of the Bmat. Effectively, what you're going to have to do is just refamiliarize yourself with what you covered at GCSE and practice a lot more. Very often, the physics is a section where students drop a lot of marks because most students also don't do physics at A-level. It's, I would say about 80% of the medics I speak to have done biology, chemistry, maths. So for a lot of medics, it is a problem. I'm not too good at physics. I dropped it for a reason. I haven't looked at it for a year. You're just going to have to suck it up, go back through things, make yourself familiar with everything, and get back into the habit of answering those kind of questions, I'm afraid. In terms of if you're talking about physics, like whilst you're at university, that's not something, because we were talking a bit earlier about doing A-levels so that you're ready for the content once you're there. It's not really something I would worry about for most medical schools. It's not a large part of the course for most of them.
Fantastic. Thank you both. There was there are a couple of questions I want to pick up in the chat. Just a question from Sheena Patel, who asked about dentistry at Oxbridge. For one reason or another, they don't offer dentistry. Dentistry is offered by many fewer universities than I thought, even though the money in dentistry is excellent. And you get to torture children. Two things that I love: money and torturing children.
I think the dentistry MMIs screen people like you out, though, Matt.
But yes, there are about a dozen universities in the UK that offer dentistry. I would go for one of those.
One thing that is worth saying about dentistry is lots of people sort of see it as less competitive, less difficult medicine. That is not the case. It is really, really competitive still. Matt's pointed out that there's far fewer universities offering it. You're measured in a very similar way to the medics.
Well, they also take the Bmat for a lot of dentistry.
What's that?
For a lot of dentistry courses, you have to take the Bmat.
Yes, so it's similar tests, similar interviews, but you have still got similar competition. So one mistake that people do make with dentistry in particular is, again, just not taking it seriously. Please do take it seriously.
There you go. Well, I'd say for all of our sakes, I also have teeth. Will, you had one final question you had flagged, and then unless any others come in, I think we'll call that a day.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Matt. So from Helene, she asks, if we want to get into medicine, how early should we start preparing? So this is similar to a question that we had earlier. So the answer is as soon as possible. Ultimately, it's like anything in life, the more work and preparation that you put into something and the more time, the more chance that you will be successful. So at the moment, we're speaking to quite a few students who did their application last year and they haven't had any offers. So now they're kind of scratching their heads thinking, well, my school told me that I was great and I had all 9s and they still didn't get in. So the answer is, if this is something that you're serious about, if this is something that you really want to do, if you want to get into medicine, then it doesn't make any sense to kind of hold off and wait. Just start now ASAP.
Fab. Thanks, Will. That's all of the questions that have come in. I am going to, I think we'll call that a day, and I'm going to slope off and start picking out my horses for the Grand National in just under 2 hours.
Yeah, I've been put into a sort of a computer-run sweepstake, and I'm very upset that the tradition of drawing names out of a hat is dying due to this, modern world that we live in these days.
I wish I'd thought of this earlier last week, and I'd have set up an office sweepstake, but I forgot. If you remind me, I will put one up for the football in June and July. Because that's 24 teams, which is just about the right number, I think. So I'll set that up in June. Everyone enjoy the horses, unless you don't like horse racing, in which case I guess just ignore it.
Yeah, there's football on as well this afternoon.
All sorts. So thank you very much, all of you who came to look at us.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Because I'm sure the football was much more interesting. And yeah, we'll see you, some of you next week, to talk about becoming a lawyer. If you decide not to be a doctor, it's also a good choice.
Yeah, that's a very quick, after this presentation, they've decided we never want to be doctors.
Well, there's just as much money in being a lawyer, and it's much less gross.
True.
So Will P, if you can say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Will W.
Are we doing this now? Okay, yeah, goodbye. Yeah.
And it's goodbye from me. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.